Welcome, everyone, and to the public, I apologize for a slight delay. Our closed meeting went a little longer than expected. And before we begin this open part of the meeting, I'd like to honor and thank our community partners of the First Nations, the Anishinaabe, and all of our nearby Indigenous neighbors. So I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby rise from the closed session and declare the regular meeting reconvened at 4:36 p.m. Could I have a motion from Councillor Collins, please?
I so move your motion, Mayor.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Finson.
I second that.
Thank you. All in favor of moving into the public meeting? Thank you. I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adjourn the regular meeting to hold a public meeting for the following matters: proposed amendments to the bylaw respecting construction, demolition, change of use, inspection, and fees; consent applications number B 2022-0002-F for Podvale and B 2022-0003-F for Archer; and zoning bylaw amendment application number R 2022-0005 for housekeeping, and zoning bylaw amendment application number R 2022-0001-F for Saunders. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat?
I so move that motion, Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Coles.
I will second that motion.
All in favor of going into public meeting? Thank you. Council will now hold a public meeting for proposed amendments to the bylaw respecting construction, demolition, change of use, inspection, and fees, the building bylaw, and consent and zoning bylaw amendment applications. In accordance with the Planning Act, Council will consider all matters placed before it prior to granting a consent or passing a zoning bylaw. If a person or public body who files an appeal of a decision of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin in respect of a proposed consent does not make written submissions to the Council before it provides or refuses to provide a provisional consent, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss the appeal. Anyone wishing to receive notice of the passing of a zoning bylaw amendment not owning land within 120 meters of the area to which it applies and who has not submitted such a request in writing should provide your full name and address to the clerk. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of Council to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the Tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Council will now hear comments related to the proposed amendments to the bylaw respecting construction, demolition, change of use, inspection, and fees, the building bylaw. I now ask the clerk to state the method by which the notice of the meeting was provided and the date on which that was provided.
Notice was provided by posting in the March 24th, 2022 edition of the local newspaper and by posting on the Township of Seguin website.
Has the township received any correspondence with respect to the proposed amendments?
Written comments have been received from Mr. Chris Busby, and that is in Council's addendum package.
Thank you. Has anyone registered to speak to the proposed amendments?
No one has registered to speak to the proposed amendments.
The purpose and effect of the proposed consent application number B 2022-0002- Podvale is to provide right-of-way access over an existing driveway on the granting lands, Podvale, benefiting the abutting lands to the west Archer. The small portion of the existing driveway utilized by the Podvales is located on the lands owned by the Archers. The purpose of proposed consent application number B 2022-0003-F for Archer is to grant right-of-way access over this small portion to the benefiting lands owned by Podvale. I now ask the clerk to state the method by which notice of the meeting was provided and the dates on which that notice was provided.
Notice of the public meeting was provided by posting the property and by regular mail on April 5th, 2022. Notice was therefore considered provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act.
Has the township received any correspondence with respect to these applications?
No correspondence has been received.
Has anyone registered to speak in favor of or in opposition to these applications?
No one has registered to speak to these applications.
Does council have any questions? I see no questions, so we proceed to the housekeeping.
Right.
The purpose of zoning bylaw amendment application number R 2022-0005 housekeeping amendment is to undertake several wording and schedule changes to provide further functionality to the implementation of the Township of Seguin zoning bylaw number 2006-125. The proposed revisions have been prepared by township staff to address several grammatical inconsistencies and regulatory conflicts. In addition, 4 site-specific map corrections showing the lands to be rezoned from OS to OS 1-5 will be undertaken to correct the zoning for the property at 1072 Seguin Trail from rural RU zone to rural industrial exception RI-41 zone to reflect the zoning from the former township zoning bylaw that was not carried forward. I now ask the clerk to state the method by which notice of the meeting was provided and the dates on which that notice was provided.
Notice of the public meeting was provided by publishing in the Beacon Star newspaper as well as posting on the township website and by regular mail on March 24th, 2022. Notice was therefore considered to be provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act.
Has the township received any correspondence with respect to this application?
No correspondence has been received.
Has anyone registered to speak in favor of or in opposition to this application?
No one has registered to speak to this application.
Does council have any questions? I see Councillor Moffat has his hand up.
Sorry, I'd like to go back to item 6A. There was, I apologize. I believe there was a reference to something in the addendum from Chris Busby. And
Yes,
I don't see that in the addendum package that I have in front of me. And it's not referenced on there's only staff,
I don't think I-
item number 9, staff reports in the index page.
But Curtis can speak to it. We can go to the public meeting.
So I'm happy to move on. I just wanted to address the fact that I didn't see it, and
okay, I think what, it should have been there.
okay,
but
that's fine.
Curtis, the building official will speak to it when we come out of the public part of the meeting, if that's okay. I'll ask
Yeah, no,
Curtis
that's
to
fine.
speak to it. Okay.
I just wanted to raise that.
Okay, so I go on to Saunders. Go on to Les. The purpose of zoning bylaw amendment application number R 2022-0001-F for Saunders is to rezone the subject lands from the limited service residential LSR zone to a limited service residential exception zone to permit the construction of a 2-story detached garage having a maximum permitted height of 6.22 meters to the midpoint and 7.34 meters to the peak. I now ask the clerk to state the method by which the notice of the meeting was provided and the dates on which that notice was provided.
Notice of the public meeting was provided by posting the property and by regular mail on March 30th, 2022. Notice was therefore considered to be provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act.
Has the township received any correspondence with respect to this application?
Correspondence has been received from Ken Villazor and Andre and Amanda Zupanik.
Has anyone registered to speak in favor of or in opposition to this application?
Brad Saunders, the applicant, has registered to speak to the application and he's present.
Okay, Mr. Saunders, would you like to speak to the application? Is he on?
Yes, I'm on here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You have the floor.
Perfect. Thank you for having me. The only reason I came on was just in case there was any questions. I wasn't really familiar with the process. But again, I just wanted to make sure that those 2 support applications were noted which they were, and I am here if there are any questions from the grouping. Thank you.
Does council have any questions for Mr. Saunders? Nope. Councillor Osborne?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the question is just regarding the garage. As I understand it, this is a home occupation business, and I just wondered what type of business it was.
So it's really this. So this is our cottage that we started building 2 years ago. So we've got the cottage is largely built up now, and we had an original building application that came through and was supported for a garage is about the same size, about 24 by 20. But the height restriction on it met the previous height restriction, which I believe is 4.5 meters. So upon reviewing sort of our needs going forward in the future to make sure that we have enough storage when we eventually move north, we decided that while we're doing a garage, it makes sense to make some usable space upstairs for more storage once we eventually move out of the city. So the idea was to create that second story, or the second story that's there, that provides us with more storage space, given the same footprint that we're looking to do. We're not looking to build a massive 50 by 50 sort of place. We just wanted something that fit in perfectly, but it did give us usable space upstairs.
If you didn't mind me asking, I just wondered what type of business you were entertaining hosting that.
Oh, I'm not. There's no business taking place. This is our property that we're eventually going to retire in. I'm going to have my downstairs shop where I have my different, jet ski, boat, whatever we have down there, car. And then upstairs will be the main storage for all the house and Christmas trees and all that stuff that you accumulate over time. So there'll be no business there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saunders.
Councillor Moffat?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Saunders, just to follow up then, as part of the building permit application, this area is designated as storage and not living space then?
Yeah, there'll be no living space there. We have more than enough room in our cottage. It's just really downstairs. We're going to have a wide open area in the cottage. So we won't really have that space when we eventually move out of the city. We've got 2 kids, lots of stuff. I think we're going to need that space, especially once you start putting things like your trailer and things that you have when you're up north, I guess, that fill up the downstairs of the garage. We definitely want that space. So there'll be no living quarters, like that sort of thing upstairs. It's just storage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Council will now close the public meeting and reconvene the regular public meeting. The public meeting motion that the public meeting held for the following matters is hereby closed and the regular meeting is hereby reconvened. The proposed amendments to the bylaw respecting construction, demolition, change of use, inspection and fees, the consent application number B 2022-0002-F for Pod Vadley and B 2022-0003-F for Archer, and zoning bylaw amendment application number R 2022-0005 and zoning bylaw amendment application number R 2022-0001-F for Saunders. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne
So moved, Mayor.
and seconded by Councillor Fellner?
I second that, Mayor.
All in favor? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to put this motion on the floor and then I'd like Curtis to speak to it. I have a motion that bylaw number 2022-052, being a bylaw respecting construction, demolition, change of use, inspections and fees, and to repeal bylaw number 2019-031 and all other bylaws and resolutions or parts thereof contrary hereto or inconsistent herewith is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Collins
I so move your motion, Mayor.
and seconded by Councillor Finson?
I second that.
And do I see Curtis? Yes, I do see Curtis. Curtis, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship. I
I appreciate those comments, and just with respect to the changes of the bylaw previously itemized in a previous staff report, they were to simplify our building permit fee calculation, reduce the amount of options that the customer had in order to calculate those fees, and streamline our bylaw to align with some of the efficiencies and processes we've recently implemented. We've seen some comments from Mr. Busby that suggested that the wording, I'm not sure if it is in your agenda package, or addendum package, but the suggestion was that some of the wording was contradictory with respect to requiring PDF documents or written submissions of applications. And I assure you, upon review of that, that's not the case. The bylaw revisions do require submission of electronic format now, but that's not to say that staff here won't assist the customer in accomplishing those submissions in PDF or digital format. Some of the comments also submitted by Mr. Busby outline a complicated fee calculation, which again, I'd assure you is not the case. If anybody would like to spend some time with that, I'm certainly open to reviewing that with the customers to show them that the new building permit fee calculations are either based on a flat rate, given the type of application you're applying for, or based on a square foot of the structure proposed. There was also some questions regarding the comparative municipalities to base our building permit fees. And the comparison municipality was McDougall, but that wasn't selected as a comparison to base our fee revisions on. It was to identify that other municipalities in our area are using similar approaches with calculating building permit fees based on square footage. So that said, I believe I can address any of those concerns. If council had any further questions with respect to that, I'd be happy to answer.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. So Curtis, looking at the building services fee schedule A, I notice item F refers to temporary tent. Could you define what that means for me, please? My question, first thought that came to mind was the shelter.
Is what that, through you, your worship, is what that would be, Councillor Osborne, is quite often the resorts or larger property owners will put up a tent on a temporary basis to accommodate a gathering or a wedding, a special event. And in those cases, they are required, once they're of a certain size, they're required to get a building permit for those. They are quite often temporary in nature, so we call it a temporary tent permit. It's a flat rate fee, and they usually erect it for the event. It gets inspected, and then it's dismantled and removed.
Okay, fine. That's fine. This has no relationship then to these shelter logic, vehicular shelters or equipment shelters, you know, the type, I mean, the round, half round. They do not require a building permit. Am I correct?
Through you, your worship, to Councillor Osborne, that is correct.
Because we did have a discussion about this some years ago. It was quite controversial. I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on that. Thank you very much, Curtis.
Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. I just want to follow up with that point on the temporary tent. How many permits have we actually issued recently on a temporary tent? I was not aware that you needed a permit. And I'm wondering if there's an education process with regards to that, Curtis, that we may want to endeavor to get out there.
Through your worship to Councillor Moffat, there is a minimum size where you do not require a building permit for a temporary tent. I believe the information is on our website, but I'd be happy to share that with anybody who calls in. To date, this year already, we've issued 2 event tents or temporary tents on various resorts. So they are a common thing.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Thanks for simplifying life for our builders, Curtis. I have a motion on the floor, or that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby grant provisional approval to consent applications number B 2022-0002-F for Pod Valley, and B, 2022-0003-F for Archer, subject to the conditions set out in the decisions. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat
I so move that motion, Mayor.
and seconded by Councillor Coles?
I will second that motion.
All in favor? Is there any discussion? No discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Moving right along here. And I have a motion that bylaw number 2022-046, being a bylaw to amend the Township of Seguin zoning bylaw number 2006-125, is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne
So moved, Mayor.
and seconded by Councillor Fellner?
I'll second that, Mayor.
Is there any discussion? No, all in favor? Thank you. And now we're going to move up items 9D and E just to accommodate the folks from MHBC. And D is on page 141 of your council package. I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby grant provisional approval to consent application number B 2021-0016-H and B 2021-0017-H for Gray, subject to the conditions set out in the decisions. Could I have a motion from Councillor Collins
So move your motion, Mayor.
and seconded by Councillor Finson?
I will second that.
Jamie from HBC,
Yes, I'm here.
do you want to talk to that a little bit and tell us what it's about?
Sure, Your Worship. This is an application for consent that council has seen previously. Planscape was the consulting planner for the applicants on this. There is a private road, which there was a number of comments provided on. There have been comments provided by residents both in favor and in opposition of the proposed application. There was a comment received from a property owner as part of the addendum package this afternoon, and we haven't had a chance to review that in a lot of detail yet. It was from the applicant's lawyer. They suggested some modified wording to one of the conditions of provisional consent that was proposed. This, as you recall, is a situation where there's frontage on the main lake, Joe, but there's also frontage on a small Fraser Lake in behind. And one of the conditions of consent was to limit development or restrict development adjacent to Fraser Lake, as there had been previous concerns identified with respect to capacity of that lake and ensuring that there was no future development on that. So a condition of consent was included in that respect. The lawyer, the letter that was received and provided to me this afternoon does identify that they would like alternative wording to that condition included. I have not had an opportunity, including the use of a holding symbol, and I haven't had a chance to really dive into that in a lot of detail yet. I did reach out to the applicants because they were recently just provided with this information as well. They would like to proceed with a decision if council's supportive of the application this evening. They're not going to oppose a deferral if council decides to defer it so that staff can take another look at the most recent comments that have been received. I will note that it's unfortunate the comments have been provided so late in the process that we haven't had a chance to review them in advance of this meeting, but that's the process. So.
Thank you very much.
And I guess the only thing I'll add is the staff recommendation report was to approve the consent application based on a series of conditions.
Yeah, I think it's very unfortunate that we got it less than a few minutes before the council meeting. So my feeling is that if we could let staff delve into the alternate wording suggestions, it would be appropriate. I see a comment, hand up from Councillor Moffat.
I was just gonna basically say what you said, Mayor. So thank you on that. And I recognize timing wasn't great, but I think that was sort of the overall message that we received at our earlier meeting. And given that we are meeting now every 2 weeks, it's not a extended period of time. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Moffat, could you move to defer it? And then I'll ask for a seconder.
I shall move that motion, Mayor, to defer.
Do I have someone who will second that deferral motion?
I'll second it.
Councillor Coles, okay. Pardon? And so we're voting on deferring. All in favor of deferring until staff has a chance to review the comments received. That's all in favor. Thank you. So we are deferring. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jamie.
Problem. Thank you.
And now we move on to 9E, which states that bylaw number 2022-022, being a bylaw to amend Township of Seguin zoning bylaw number 2006-125, property roll number 4903-010-008-03000 R 2021-0017-H for 34 Maureen Drive is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat?
I so move that motion, Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Coles.
I will second that motion.
Is there any discussion, or Jamie, would you like to speak to it? Councillor Osborne, you have your hand up.
I do, Mayor.
Okay, go ahead.
I would like to recommend that we proceed and approve this, given the topography and the nature of the area on that thin peninsula. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Robinson, do you have any comments?
I'm here to answer questions. There was a public meeting on this application to modify lot coverage on a unique shaped lot and to allow for the construction of a detached garage. But there's not a whole lot. If council's read the staff report, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So I'm here to answer any questions if there are any of council. Thank you.
I see no questions, so all in favor of proceeding with this? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. I think that's it for you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship and members of council, for making those tweaks so I can attend my next meeting. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Have a good evening.
You too. Council will now consider the following road allowance application. Shore Road Allowance Application Number RAS 2021-0010-H for Casola on Little Whitefish Lake, bylaw number 2022-035. Have any written objections been received related to this application?
No written objections have been received related to the application.
Has anyone registered to speak to this application?
No one has registered to speak to this application.
Lauren, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing further, other than we've received signed consent form from the neighbor to the east. The neighbor to the west already owns their shore road allowance, but I'm here if council has any questions.
Okay, so I'll read the motion. That bylaw number 2022-035, being a bylaw to close, stop up and sell a portion of the original shore road allowance, application number RAS-2021-0010-H for Casola is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne?
So move.
And seconded by Councillor Fellner.
I'll second that.
All in favor of approving the shore road allowance? Thank you. That's carried. And we have a delegation from Nadine Hammond from the West Perry Sound Museum. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, you have the floor.
I do have a PowerPoint presentation. Is it all right to share?
Yep, I think you can go ahead and do your screen share.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council, thank you for your 2022 contribution. We appreciate your continued support of the West Perry Sound District Museum. Today, I am joined by Rob Wood, Chair of the Board. In 2020, a week after the world shut down due to COVID-19, the museum suffered a sprinkler burst that caused damage to the public washrooms and a temporary gallery. Shut down not just for public health guidelines, but construction to repair water damage and complete a renovation to the permanent gallery, the West Perry Sound District Museum took a step back from creating public exhibitions to concentrating on reimagining who we wanted to be as a museum. The result was a new strategic plan and mission statement. The key points of a strategic plan are to enhance access to the West Perry Sound District heritage, capture ongoing history, resources to ensure security, and protect our infrastructure. Since the start of 2022, we have made progress on two of the objectives: enhancing access and capturing our ongoing history. With the lifting of restrictions, this has obviously made this much easier. The Uri Smith Gallery is open and the train is running, and another escape room experience has been stumping visitors as they try to steal the charter so that J.R. Booth can build his railway terminus in Depot Harbor. Progress has also been made in digitizing the Perry Sound North Star. This step will preserve the information within the digitized papers and enable for efficient searches, and will one day allow us to make them available to a much broader public. The Connecting Me to You project isn't a new one, but with the receipt of an Ontario Trillium grant, it has been made much easier to capture stories with the purchase of equipment to record these interviews. With that, I bring you to some of our highlights from 2021. And from here on, I would like to turn the floor over to Rob Wood.
Okay, and if you want to switch to the next slide. And we'll go to that first budget slide. So here are the operating expenses for 2022. It's about $208,000. And next. And here are the revenues. As you can see, the numbers clearly show a shortfall of approximately $60,000 for 2022, which we have partially addressed with an increased funding request from the municipalities. Fortunately, the government has been fairly generous through the pandemic, and Nadine has capitalized on a number of grant opportunities, as well as all available wage subsidies. So thanks to this additional funding, the board sees no cash flow issues for the museum through 2022 or 2023. In addition to the 2022 budget, the board passed the museum's first capital budget. This will allow us to proactively address the needs of our aging building. This year, the intention is to work on some of the sprinkler system, as well as the rebuilding of the back deck. And we are hoping that will allow us to provide a comforting spot for our patrons and potentially attracting events or activities. And we've also been very fortunate to have an active and engaged board. With Zoom, it makes it so easy for everybody to attend. So we are pretty much full house every month. I'd like to thank Councillor Finson for her contributions. Her wisdom and guidance have been much appreciated by me. And I'd like to thank you, your worship, and council for your support year in and out, and for hearing us today. And with that, I'd like to pass it back for any questions.
Thank you very much, both Nadine and Rob. Does council have any questions? I guess I have one for Nadine. Did you ever connect with J.R. Booth?
I did. I had a wonderful conversation with him, and we incorporated some of his insights into the text panels that we have up on the wall. I am also hoping that he will come and see the train in person.
Well, let me know when you invite him. Just for people's background, J.R. Booth is the grandson of the man that built the railway and is someone that I ski with. So it was an easy connection to make. And I guess I have one other question. Does the museum board ever undertake any fundraising?
Yes. Okay,
go ahead, Rob. No,
yes,
go ahead.
We do have a fundraising committee that's been kind of on hiatus the last few months. Our fundraising leader has stepped away from that, but we're looking forward to getting back into it. We do have some fundraising initiatives that we are working on, and as far as collecting heroes of the area and things like that, and it all ties in with collecting people's stories. So Councillor Finson has graciously offered up her fundraising expertise. So I intend to totally capitalize on that as soon as we can get something going further.
Thank you. I see a question coming from Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. So Rob, as noticed in your budget numbers there, you got that $60,000 shortfall. You're obviously have enough revenue to make payroll. What is the plan other than fundraising for your immediate shortfall? Is there going to be an ask of the municipalities, further ask?
I don't foresee an ask greater than what we asked this year for the next couple of years. We are looking into ways to make us more self-sustainable, but we're working on it.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Fellner.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I'm looking at the two slides for budget numbers and income and expense, Rob, and then you mentioned that you created a capital budget. Is the money's in the the capital expenditures this year, is that in the expenses on the budget numbers? Is that what the facilities and equipment number is, or can you just sort of elaborate on that a little bit for me?
Okay.
Would you like me to answer that? I'll answer that. No, the numbers provided, what you see in the slideshow are strictly operational. I can absolutely send council the capital budget. It's a 5-year capital budget outlining items that we want to tackle in the next 5 years. We've been very lucky that the Township of the Archipelago has offered to fund the repairs to our sprinkler system, which are not included in that budget, as well as Rob previously mentioned, our deck repair. The idea is we are looking for ways to fund that. For the last several years, we've been setting aside 5% of all municipal contributions into a fund that is aim to go directly towards capital reserves, and I'm using those funds in order to leverage them for grant proposals in order to address capital repairs.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Rob and Nadine, for the presentation and for the work you do to keep our community aware of our history and our heritage. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time tonight. It's good to see you all.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby receive the staff reports as presented on the agenda for the April 19th, 2022 meeting of council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Collins
I so move your motion, Mayor.
and seconded by Councillor Finson?
I'll second that.
All in favor of receiving the staff reports as they appear on the agenda? Okay, that's carried. Okay. This is a long one. Sorry, I've got a lot of reading on this first motion. Whereas MPW Enterprises has made an application for a sign permit for their location at 1209 Highway 141. And whereas the application proposes contravention to the following section of bylaw number 2007-116, being a bylaw to regulate the size, use, location, and maintenance of signs and advertising devices within the Township of Seguin, as amended 5.1.1, except as otherwise expressly permitted by the provision of this bylaw, signs are permitted only on lands zoned for commercial or industrial uses. And whereas Section 7, minor variances and temporary exceptions of bylaw number 2007-116, as amended, outlines conditions for minor variance to the bylaw. And whereas council considers the variance requested by MPW Enterprises to be minor in nature. Therefore, it be resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby approve the following minor variance to bylaw number 2007-116, being a bylaw to regulate the size, use, location, and maintenance of signs and advertising devices within the Township of Seguin as amended for MPW Enterprises and for their application for a sign permit at their location of 1209 Highway 141. Minor variance to section 5.1.1 to permit a sign to be located on lands zoned as rural. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat?
I so move that motion, Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Coles.
I'll second that motion.
Is there any discussion on this? MPW is a dry land marina. Councillor Osborne.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. In going through this, it looks as though this is a 6x8 dimension to be placed adjacent to the highway. And in the MTO, I'm just wondering if we're going to have any problem with the province here, because the home occupation sign shall consist of one sign no greater than 3 square meters, 32 square feet. 6x8 would be 48. And I guess my question is, I'm in favor of them having a sign, by the way. My question is, are we going to have any pushback from MTO based on the area of the size of the sign?
I'm going to ask our clerk to respond to that.
Thank you.
The township will not receive any pushback. Our bylaw requires where it's on a provincial highway or right of way that MTO approval is also required. So that is the responsibility of the applicant. We also make the applicant aware of that. And we have not received any issues from the MTO on this one. Having said that, both us and the MTO have to provide permits before they can actually put a sign up.
Thank you.
I see no further questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Moffat.
Sorry, just to follow up on that. So either the application that they sent us is in error because we know that MTO wouldn't approve what they've submitted. So even if we approve this tonight, it's going to go to MTO and they may have to change it to fit within their parameters. That's what I'm understanding.
Go ahead, Craig.
Not exactly. We don't forward to the MTO and we don't know that it won't meet the MTO. We don't know all their criteria and their exemptions and everything else. That's why we just have our own permit process and they have theirs and the applicant's responsible to go through that. The one thing that we do have is if they have to receive and they do receive MTO approval, our signed permit fee is waived. But everything else on this application met the requirements of the Seguin bylaw, with exception to the zoning. And that's really because they had to receive a special zoning to put that activity on this property. And the best location of the sign for the applicant is not on the little piece that actually has the business. It's on the rest of the land out by the highway.
So we're just approving the zoning and not the actual size of the sign.
No, we would be approving their actual application. We would give them a signed permit from the Township of Seguin that says they meet our criteria. Along with
Okay.
that zoning exception.
Then I think we're inconsistent with what we know from MTO
Right.
to approve it.
Yeah.
No, we're not, because we don't actually know that the MTO will or won't approve it. That's not part of our process. All that does is if they don't get the approval, if the MTO denies it, they know that they don't have approval to put it there because they need both permits.
I think the onus is on the applicant to get two permits, one from the township and one from the MTO. And MTO certainly did approve bigger signs on other highway properties.
No, I understand that, but we have a letter of correspondence from March 29th telling this. The sign is referenced by Councillor Osborne. And we are approving a sign application for something that's bigger, which to me is inconsistent with what we know at this time. And therefore, I don't think we should be approving the sign unless it meets what we think, or at least what we know from MTO.
That's
So
right.
I would like to defer this approval until basically we do have consistency between what MTO is going to do and what we should be doing.
Do you want to speak to that?
The issue that council will get into with that is you are then going to take every sign permit application that comes in that also requires MTO approval and basically do MTO review of a permit application.
You know,
Because what you're saying is every time a sign permit application comes in along any of the provincial highway corridors, if we don't think it meets MTO approval without just saying you have to go to the MTO and get the approval, then yeah, you're putting the onus back on us to say it does or doesn't meet their approval.
No.
That's up to the MTO, right?
No, I'm not saying that at all, Craig. What I'm saying is we have a letter that says the maximum size of the sign. We know that the maximum size of the sign is bigger than what MTO would approve. So on the letter, on the face of it, to me, we're approving something that we know that MTO would not approve. And therefore, I'm not suggesting that we know all the MTO rules. All I'm suggesting is that the applicant should provide a request that it meets MTO, because we should be the secondary approver once we know that MTO has done it. And to me, I think that we are jumping the queue by approving it at this time before MTO opines on it, given that we know that's larger than what they would approve.
Thank you for your input. Councillor Osborne.
Yes, Mayor, I agree with Councillor Moffat here on the consistency issue. This March 29th letter from MTO is an approval. It says approval is granted to Morgan Watson for signs at the above location. And then it goes on to say the limitation to that approval, which is 32 square feet. So they've already approved a 32 square foot sign. So at that bodes the question in my mind is what did they apply to MTO for in terms of size? Was it less than 32 square feet? Or was it the same as a request to us? It creates a conundrum and it shows inconsistency. And they have approval from MTO for 32 square feet. We're approving 48 square feet. It just, I don't think that makes sense. I agree with Councillor Moffat. Thank you.
Go ahead.
What you're actually looking at is not an MTO permit. That's not an approval. That's a letter from the MTO to them based on something they've submitted or spoke to the MTO about. An actual permit from the MTO is not a letter, it is a permit. We have those on other applications when they put them into us to get a waiver of the fee. So what they actually put into the MTO and the MTO actually gives a permit for, we don't know yet. That's not a permit, that letter you're looking at.
But Craig, sorry to interrupt. It says home occupation sign approval. Approval is granted to Morgan Watson. To me, regardless of a permit, they're stating in writing that this sign is approved based on their size limitations. So whether it's a permit or whether it isn't, they're stating in writing, it's a home occupation sign approval in writing. And there's no comment about permit or any further action on behalf of the applicant.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree it's not very clear as far as we know, unless there's more information, but that is not an MTO permit.
Okay, well, I rest my case.
Okay, we have a
I'll let you
question
deal
from
with it.
Councillor Collins. Can we move on, please?
Yeah.
Councillor Collins,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. In this request, I don't see the Seguin sign bylaws. And I could relate back to, there was a bylaw in Seguin that was agreed with the Ministry of Transportation that the only billboard signs would be on the 400 and not on Highway 518 or Highway 141 in Seguin Township. And how I know that is that back in 2015, when I asked for a sign for a decorative welcoming sign into Orville, that came to my attention. So this is what I would say a billboard, and it's a sign of a commercial operation. So I don't know if that's legal in Seguin or not, simply because of our sign bylaw. Because if everyone here back in the day could remember, back in the early 20s, there were signs everywhere, signs on trees, signs, it didn't matter. There were signs everywhere. And that got remedied because of the administration of Seguin back then. And I'm sure, Craig, you were part of that, and having a meeting with the Ministry of Transportation. So I'm wondering how the heck this is even on our agenda, to be honest with you. So that's what I have to say anyways. I'm not going to approve this as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
So Councillor Collins, through you, your worship, you're correct in some of your recollection. It was field advertising signs. They were all along 141. That a field advertising sign is a sign that's located on a property that's not where the business is located and advertises a business elsewhere. And they were popping up a lot along 141. And the council of the day had concerns, and there were meetings with MTO. And you're correct. They agreed, and Seguin Council had to, in the bylaw, designate scenic corridors in Seguin Township, which are provincial highways and Osler Park Road, Rose Point Road, but cannot include Highway 400, as you stated. This is not a field advertising because it's actually located on the property where the business is. So that's why it would pass our bylaw. It was to stop a lot of field advertising signs.
Thank you, Craig.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it would pass ours, but I'm wondering about MTO. Ministry of Transportation. I don't think it just doesn't make any sense because it goes against or what they, you know, the legal binding.
Okay, I'm gonna
you know,
ask the Chief Administrative Officer to speak to this.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. As I review the application for sign permit, the Township of Seguin application for sign permit, I just want to draw your attention to on page 116 of your agenda package, number 4, sign description. It speaks to a 6-inch width and an 8-foot height. The surface area of that sign is 24 square feet. So and if you further along a couple of pages, there's a couple sketches, and then you'll see an example of, on page 122 of your agenda package, you'll see an example. And I think what you see is a decorative frame, framing out a sign. And at 24 square feet, as per the application, it is also in compliance with the MTO's letter stating a maximum of 32 square feet. So I think as council considers this, I think the facts are, that it will take up a greater space with the perimeter and the decorative attempt to make it look nice, but the actual signage itself is also compliant with what the ministry has written in their letter, understanding it's not a permit, but understanding what they have defined.
Thank you very much for the clarification. So we have a motion on the floor. And I would like to, Councillor Osborne, last comment. You've spoken 3 times on this issue.
Well, I apologize for that, Mayor. So Jason, to you, you're talking about the surface area on page 116, correct? Where it says 6 by 3 and 1 by 6 panel surface area 24 square feet. Is that what you're referring to?
That's correct.
So by this, the actual sign itself, the surface is only 24 square feet, which would be within the limitations of MTO.
That's correct.
So it's the posts that make it 6 by 8.
Yeah, and further to that, Councillor Osborne, and for the rest of council, on page 118, I recognize that this sketch may be not as clear as possible, but you'll see the signage being framed out by the framing materials, and that signage, as I read it and as I understand it, are a 6 by 3 is the main sign and a 1 by 6 panel at the bottom, as identified on that sketch.
Looking at the sign, the sketch, proportionately, a 6 by 8 frame, the way that sign is placed in the frame certainly couldn't be 3 by 6. That would be 2 feet shorter one way and 3 feet shorter the other way. So it's convoluted. Anyway, I think in the future, maybe before things like this come to council, that we have discussions with MTO to make sure we're on the same page, rather than have long discussions about something that's pretty simple. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor, and I would like to call a vote on this. All in favor of approving the sign for MPW Enterprises? 1, 2, 3. And I'll vote in favor. So that's 4. That's carried. Okay, I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby grant an exemption for application number E01-2022-0001-F for 9 Walters Way, property roll number 4903-030-02011-00000 for Ubicus pursuant to section 5.1 of bylaw number 2008-104, being a bylaw to prohibit or regulate blasting in areas in the Township of Seguin, subject to the conditions as outlined in staff report number DPS-PL-2022-053, attached as Schedule A to this resolution. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne
So moved.
and seconded by Councillor Fellner?
No, I'll second that, Mayor.
Is there any discussion? Taylor? Any questions? Taylor, do you want to explain a little bit about it?
Through your worship, I'm here if anyone has any questions. I think this sketch helps illustrate what they're proposing to do, which is largely blast underneath a building that they've determined that they have the right to do through zoning. So I'm here for any questions.
And as I read it, it's not even going to be seen from the water, is it?
That's correct. Yep. It would all be under a building footprint.
Okay. All in favor of approving this? Thank you. That's carried. Oof. And this is a motion about the floating accommodations. It's a long one. Bear with me. Whereas the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin understands that the Ministry of Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resources and Forestry is seeking public input on the use of floating accommodations on Ontario waterways per ERO number 019-5119. And whereas the Township of Seguin has 186 lakes and concerns with floating accommodations are affecting a growing number of municipalities. And whereas the Township of Seguin has an environment first philosophy, where the vision is to enhance the natural heritage features and ecological functions of the waterfront, protect and maintain the character of shoreline residential areas, and to recognize that lakes have a recreational carrying capacity. And whereas floating accommodations represent a threat to the environment due to waste discharge, conflict with the township's vision for the waterfront, represent an undesirable land use, and are residential use on public lands. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin requests that the province amend the Public Lands Act to permit the use of waterways only for traveling, vacationing, boating public as originally envisioned by the legislation. And further, that legislation be amended to restrict or prohibit floating residences and provide this province with tools to enact enforcement on floating residences. Could I have a motion from Councillor Collins?
I so move your motion, Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Finson.
I second that motion.
I think there was a piece of correspondence in your addendum related to this, which was support from Otter Lake to this motion. Councillor Moffat, you have a comment?
Just two comments. I'm glad we're getting out in front of this. It is becoming an issue in neighboring areas. This was on the agenda of the recent Federation of Ontario Cottagers Association AGM. And I actually shared this resolution with one of my fellow board members from there, who is a resident in Whitestone, and they are going to be moving this onto their agenda package for their upcoming meeting. They thought that the resolution and staff report was done well, and I've said I would pass along those complimentary comments tonight. So well done getting ahead of this, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? All in favor of passing this? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Osborne, you have a comment?
Yes, I do, Mayor. Thank you. I'm not sure if this is relative, but I never did get a response to my query on a floating sauna in Lake Rosso, moored at our township-owned dock area. Does this would this kind of a resolution cover floating saunas as well?
Taylor, I'm sorry, it's over to you on that one.
It was there all summer and everybody just ignored it. It was brought to my attention by Dan from the paint shop.
Through your worship, I don't think this ERO posting is geared towards something like a floating sauna. I would think as we with the bylaw department, if it is moored to a public dock, that might be more of essentially a docking issue or mooring issue on public lands versus temporary accommodations. So I think that would be a public use or private use of public property issue and overnight stay and whatnot. That would be my first guess.
Thank you.
I think if it's still there, Councillor Osborne, you should bring it to our attention this summer again.
I brought it to the attention of the Director of Facilities. I don't know if that's the correct path.
Mm.
Last summer. Your worship, members of council, just jump in quickly. I think we're aware of the situation from last summer, Councillor Osborne. It's certainly an enforcement issue, a bylaw matter that we will be closely monitoring this coming spring.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Finson, go ahead.
I just want to say that I think the reason why it was moored at the dock is because it got stuck under the bridge. It couldn't get out. It couldn't get back. The water was too high, and my kids got on it to get it under the bridge because we didn't know, like he was coming down the river, the Shadow River. Anyway, he couldn't get under the bridge. So my kids stood on the sauna deck to get it to go lower, to go under the bridge. So because they were stuck in front of my house. So anyway, that's why it didn't come back up the river, I think, because they couldn't get it back under the bridge and they from down the river. Anyway, hopefully it won't happen again. But that's why they were stayed at the dock, is because they couldn't get it back up the river, I think.
Thank you for the clarification. We have a motion on the table to approve this motion to prohibit floating residences and send it to the province. All in favor? Thank you. Oh, I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby award the supply and delivery and application of line painting and pavement markings contract number 2022-006 to Stone Line Markings for a total not to exceed 45,000 plus applicable taxes. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat?
I so move that motion, Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Coles.
I'll second that motion.
And we have Tom McLeod here to speak to it. Do you tell us about it?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship and Council. Something we do every year, go out for tender to get the line painting completed in our township. It's something we got to do every spring. First thing we got to do is get the sweeping done, and then we can apply the paint down on the ground. So I just got off the phone with the potential successful line painter, and they're ready to rock and roll after this, but also after the sweeping, which is a little delayed as well. So that's about it.
Any questions for Mr. McLeod? All in favor? Thank you. And we have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby accept the resignation of Julie Whalen from the Township of Seguin Public Library Board and thank Ms. Whalen for her service on the board. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne?
So moved.
And seconded by Councillor Fellner.
I'll second that, Mayor.
All in favor of accepting her resignation? Thank you. And we move on to council reports. I can't remember who started first last council meeting, but how about you start, Councillor Moffat?
Thank you, Mayor. It's been a pretty quiet couple weeks, but several emails on summer maintained roads. Some follow-up from our last meetings on that and the article in the newspaper on the subject matter. But the other item is preparing for the Muskoka Watershed Council's annual general meeting. We've finally got all our governance matters resolved, which have taken some time, but our meeting is scheduled for the 22nd. And we look forward to hearing from all the members and having a good AGM. And that is it on my end. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Mayor, and mine was equally less busy. I was at a conference, the Good Roads Conference, with a couple of our colleagues here, and good conference, great networking. I have a report which I'm submitting, but just to say briefly, some of the emphasis, there was two takeaways that I got from the conference that I think are really important for all of us. One was traffic calming, how to do it successfully and make, enhance the environment at the same time as calming traffic. And another one was in several sessions about working with our Indigenous nations and how to, our procurement and including them in procurement opportunities as well as environmental assessments, those kinds of things. So those were kind of the strong points. And of course, all the politicians were there handing out dollars. If any come drizzling in our way, I hope we grab them. I'm sure they will, because they're electioneering right now. Then after that, in the evening of the 13th, we had a Rose Point Trail meeting, and I guess a couple things that, and I did talk to Jason briefly about this, but it occurs to me after our last meeting that we need to ensure for all our trails that we have routine maintenance occurring. I would suggest by staff on a probably weekly basis, we inspect the trails to ensure that they're, number one, safe, habitable or travelable, I guess, by bikes and for pedestrians, because most of these are bike or pedestrian trails. Sometimes there's ATVs, but the Rose Point Trail in particular is more of a pedestrian trail and pedestrian usage. So it's really important that it be maintained adequately. And that includes, the surface treatment, in fact. There's some questions about budgeting for a bridge and for fill in a few places, which I'll be meeting with Tom on that later. Yeah, there's a $200,000 bridge which was proposed, and I don't think it's in the capital budget, but at this point I can't recall, so we'll deal with that. But the point was on the Rose Point Trail is that we are doing our duty as owners of assets by maintaining these things properly. It's really, really important. That's it for me.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have a CPAC meeting on Thursday, the 21st. There was some preliminary discussion about whether to hold in person or virtual. It was split. It will be held virtually, but the officers at OPP insisted the next meeting will be in person. And if you don't want to attend, send somebody else. Which leads me to a question as to Seguin's operation, what our forecast is for in-person versus virtual, which maybe we can get at a later date. One item of interest, the bell tower behind Alsace or 141 in Humphrey has been up for a month or two. It's all fenced and the antennas are on. I'm assuming it's operational, which would be good for the people in the Humphrey area. I don't know about the other towers that were designated down Clear Lake Road, whether it's up or not. Maybe Terry could give some indication of that. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Fellner.
Thank you, Mayor. Since the last meeting, I attended a Committee of Adjustment meeting. Pretty busy. There was 8 applications altogether. So, in anticipation of the construction season, I guess, all pretty minor in nature, and I as well attended Good Roads with Councillor Coles, and he's given a pretty good recap of. I did attend a couple other sessions that were of interest, and I'll be outlining that in my report. With regards to the bell tower on the Clear Lake Road, I believe it's operational only because I now get reception on that part of the Clear Lake Road, except for right under the tower. So instead of getting no reception for most of that stretch of road, now I do get reception, but not under the tower. The fence is up and the gate's up. It's hard to tell. It looks like everything's been put on it, so. Other than that, nothing really to report over the last couple of weeks. So.
Thank you very much. As we all know, Bell does their own thing without telling us when and where.
Yeah.
But there are more and more people able to get their wireless to home internet service right now. So that's good
Must
news.
be running, yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Collins.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. On February or in April 14th, I attended a DSAB meeting. And in that meeting, there happened to be a report of the Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force results. And this task force results were listed on our agenda February the 8th. This task force was February the 8th, 2022. The contents of that report was first a letter to Minister Clark, and it focused on getting more homes built and making land available to build, to cut the red tape so we can build faster and reduce costs, reduce the costs of build, buy, and rent, and support and scaling up housing supply. So since that was on our agenda and actually in the Tammy's report, the CAO report, monthly report, I thought it would be a great time to talk about our MZO. So I took this opportunity and I said I would like to comment on the February 8th Task Force Housing Report and simply reiterate that housing is at a critical stage. And I said, not only do we have the same opinion, I'm talking Seguin, as the housing report states that Seguin Township, with 100% council approval, prepared an MZO, which is a minister's zoning order, to address the housing shortage in our area. I also said it is our moral belief and obligation to move in that direction. And we would hope other municipalities, especially councillors and mayors who sit on housing boards and housing committees, see this as well. I personally can't see any reason why our endeavor will not be supported. And if we cannot garner support, we have land, the good sense, and the financial clout to do it ourselves. We anticipate, and we are optimistic, getting final approval of the MZO within the next 6 weeks. And then I said, if anybody on the board wants more information on the MZO, you can see it on our township website. And I also said the task force report was downloaded to our website as well. I thought that it was about time because, you know, we've had a number of meetings prior to this report on our agenda that no one ever asked us, because we are in the housing business, DSAT, that no one asked us, Gail or I, how's the MZO going? Because I thought there would be interest with the other board members. So this is why I brought this to their attention. And that was on April 14th. And the chair, Rick Sanusi, thanked me for the report. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I think the more places we talk about it, the better. Councillor Finson.
Thank you, Mayor.
I was at that DSAB meeting and it was wonderful. He covered everything possible, and I couldn't see everybody on the screen, but I'm pretty sure there were some pink cheeks in the crowd. He did a great job. It was a good meeting, Ted. I also was at the Good Roads Conference, and it was wonderful. One of the things I'm going to say is that they had, it started out with Indigenous singers. Like Art said, it was really focused on Indigenous cooperation, truth and reconciliation. So we started with Indigenous singers. Then they sang a national anthem I'd never heard before. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And it had 3 languages. It had English, French, and I don't know which Indigenous language, but it was beautiful. Of course, there were lots of announcements by a lot of ministers. Again, there was a lot of focus on traffic calming, a lot of focus on environmental assessment. There was also some really good ideas on bridges that I picked up some information for. Remember, Art, we saw those like temporary bridges or those easy to put together bridges that were really cheap. So speaking of the bridge for the trail, it might be an option to get one really cheap. Anyway, there was a lot of good information, a lot of good networking. It was a wonderful conference. Chief Cadamus Delorme was there, and he talked about the uncomfortable conversations about truth and reconciliation. It was wonderful. He was very touching and very moving. And if anybody, I think everybody should go on the conference website and just see him speak. You can go to whoever you want to, but there was a whole bunch. There was an engineer from the States who spoke about traffic calming and how engineers have had it wrong all these years, and now they've changed their minds. Instead of making the roads clear and safe, they want to close them in so that we don't go so fast. And they want to put trees and borders down the middle. So it was wonderful to watch him speak, and it just played right into what we were there for, right, Art? Everything that happened it just played right into what we're looking for. Anyway, that's all I had to say, and it was wonderful networking. It was a really good conference, and it was so nice to be back down there in person and enjoy everybody's company. I have another meeting I have a museum meeting next week, and that's about all I have, but thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll be brief. As most of you've noted, Jason and I did attend the Parry Sound Council meeting on April 5th. We will be anxiously watching this evening because Mayor McGarvey did introduce, and it got passed, a resolution before either Jason or I spoke that they would listen to us, but they would not discuss the NZO until the 19th, which we found a little strange. And at least one of their councillors said, well, can we at least ask them questions? And that carried. April 12th, we had Airport Commission meeting. And on April 12th, I also spoke to the Rotary Club of Parry Sound, where I talked about all the growth initiatives that we have here, excuse me, including the MZO. And it was resoundingly positive from the members of the Rotary Committee. There were some questions I couldn't answer that I suggested they direct towards the town of Parry Sound. On April 13th, I attended Lieutenant Governor General Elizabeth Dowswell's ceremony for the Ontario Medals for Good Citizenship, which was very interesting. 22 community leaders were awarded medals by the Lieutenant Governor. April 14th, I attended a virtual meeting with Minister Kinga Surma, who's the Minister of Infrastructure. It was a town hall meeting on broadband and this reverse auction for internet service providers that her ministry is managing. All I can say is it was kind of a repeat of what we'd heard in January, and it was mostly about how many dollars are coming out and that kind of thing, but very few specifics. And I've reached out to some of our internet service providers, and they are going to get back to me this week, but none of them bid on things in our area. Tonight, I'll be watching the Parry Sound Council meeting. And I do want to draw your attention to one of the items in correspondence. It's actually item KK on page 346. And it comes to you from Safe Quiet Lakes that we support financially. They are at a very positive lobbying stage with Transport Canada on noisy boats. And so KK is a request for anybody, you or lake associations, to reply to the Transport Canada questionnaire about noise on lakes, specifically noisy boats, Decibel Coalition. So if you have any interest in that, or it's a concern where you live or with your lake association, pass it on. Transport Canada wants to hear from the public on that issue. And that's all I have. Now, Jason, you have something?
Thank you, Worship. Just quickly wanted to share with council and the community that it is spring. I know it didn't quite look like it this morning with a bit of snow coming down, but we have kicked off our Seguin spring cleanup efforts, which run from April 19th to April 30th. And any community members that wish to participate can contact our community services department. All the information can be found on all of our social network platforms. Great opportunity to come out. We have kits ready with the bags, the vests, all the safety equipment, and our dear friends in the Rosso General Store have donated a basket for one lucky winner at least that I'm aware of, for those who do participate and snap a few shots to help us kick off spring with a cleanup. And of course, it's all centered around Earth Day coming just around the corner. So for all of us, including the community, let's do our part and help keep Seguin as beautiful as it is, and really stand behind our strategic objectives of environment first.
Yeah, and it ends with a barbecue at Humphrey. And if you're coming to the barbecue, you need to RSVP. So, Councillor Moffat, you have a question?
No, I just, one item I forgot to raise, but you reminded me, item V in the correspondence, nominations for the 2022 Senior of the Year Award. Are we doing anything with respect to that? Maybe this is towards Jason as opposed to you, Mayor, but wondering if there's anything that we're doing at the township.
Through your worship, thank you, Councillor Moffat. We're aware and we're working on a plan. I don't exactly have those details for you here this evening, but we will be helping to communicate that message and get it out in the community.
Thank you. That's what I expected. Take care.
Okay, I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby receive board and committee minutes and agendas and the correspondence as presented on the agenda and the addendum for April 19th, 2022 meeting of council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Collins to that effect?
I so move your motion, Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Finson.
I second that motion.
All in favor? Thank you. And I have a motion that bylaw number 2022-4049, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of meetings of council, is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat?
I so move that motion, Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Coles.
I will second that motion.
All in favor? Thank you. And I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adjourn this regular meeting of council at 6:02 p.m. to meet again on Monday, May 2nd, or at the call of the mayor. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne?
So moved.
And seconded by Councillor Fellner.
I'll second that, Mayor.
All in favor? Thank you. Have a good
Thank you,
evening.
everyone.
Later.
Good night.
Thank
Night
you.
all. Night.
Thanks.